Hello and Happy New Year! Lori here, and I have some new glasses. Are they not the cutest? I've been wanting these for like 18 months, and I first heard about them from a guest who was on my podcast. These are called Pear eyeglasses, and these are toppers. If you're on my YouTube channel, you can see, but I have toppers and they're magnetized. And so you can do different ones and you have different eyeglass looks. So the biggest complicating factor was it's all online and I had to figure out what lens shape was the best, or frame shape, I guess you would say, would work the best for my face because different shapes are work different on different faces. So these are kind of similar to shape of my past glasses, but new prescription. And of course, the coolest thing that I can change the different colors, and these also have designs. So there's like a Harry Potter series, and you can get Gryffindor or Gryffindorfer or however you say that themed glasses or toppers for your glasses. You can also get sunglass toppers. So cool. So this is not an ad for Pair Eyewear. This is actually just an intro to my first episode of the year, which is an interview with Kay Van Norman. And it wasn't really planned because I just find people that look interesting to talk to and to introduce you to, people who are my age or around my age, second half of life, and they are into different interesting things. They either have a business that's really interesting, they have a hobby that's really interesting, they have a story, an experience. Everybody's unique and everybody has a unique story and experience of their own. And so she is one of those people that I saw an article that she had written, and she is an expert on healthy aging. She's a president of Brilliant Aging. She directed the Keiser Institute on Aging. She serves on international boards, speaks and consults around the world, and has an extensive list of publications. She has what is called a vitality portfolio model for lifelong health. And she's also an Editor's Choice Award winner. She was featured in a book with author Jack Canfield and others. And she also has a new online course. And I think her online course is something that would be good for a kickstart for the new year. And like I said, it wasn't a plan. Oh, I'm going to have her because she has this thing for the new year. It was just as we were talking and as the conversation unfolded, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm sure the things that she does and the experience that she has would be something that would help somebody kickstart some new habits in the new year. So we talk about her vitality portfolio and the six dimensions of it. And also, Kay and I have a love for horses, a shared love, although she still has horses. I only had them when I was a teenager. I had one. And so she lives in Montana, and she just upsized, not downsized, as many of us do at this age. She upsized to 120-acre ranch in Montana, and she has six horses that she's keeping right now. She said three are her own, and the others I think belong to her sons. But what's cool is, and we didn't get into this in the interview, but I'll share with you because she told me before we recorded, she has two sons that moved within one half or quarter mile from her in one direction and like a half a mile in the other direction. So she basically said her husband, her, and their two sons live within like a mile radius of each other. So isn't that cool? And grandchildren. So she is very lucky because mine live far away. But it's really a great conversation. And I think you might want to follow up, go to her website after you listen to our conversation and see where you might get started on some new goals, a new plan, something building healthier habits in the dimensions that you feel you need to work on the most, because I think that's what's important. Is there's a lot of dimensions and sometimes we go all at them all at once, and it's first, as she said, figure out what you want, what is it that you want, and then how can you make improvements, and just start with little steps, nothing humongous. That's what we are me included, guilty of at the beginning of every year. So I hope you enjoy this. I enjoyed immensely my conversation with Kay. So listen in. Welcome to another episode of Living Your Spark Second Half. And today I have a special guest, Kay Van Norman. I was just telling her my dad's name was Norman Donald. So I have a preference for that name. I love it. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. It's been fun
Yes,
chatting with you.
I know. I'm very excited. I'll let her introduce herself, but she is the president of Brilliant Aging, and she's an internationally known healthy aging expert. I saw an article that she did, and one of the things that caught my eye was she has created this wheel. And I didn't mention this, Kay, when we were talking before I hit record, but in a program, I used to run it. I'm not running it right now, but it's called the Second Half Spark School. And one of the lessons in it is this wheel of life. And so it
Hmm.
has similar concept of your wheel. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about what people can do with your wheel, but it has these six dimensions: physical, social, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and vocational. So I'm sure we'll get into that, but why don't you just give a little synopsis of who you are? If you're on my YouTube channel, you'll see a photo of a beautiful mountain range in the background. And I asked her what that was. And I thought it was her family, but it is a family of sorts, right? It's who she goes
Yeah.
horseback riding with.
Yeah,
She's also a horsewoman. Yes.
I do. I spend a lot of time in the mountains on horseback in the summer. Living in Montana is just a glorious place to be. And I always tell people I live in a postcard. So this is one of
Yes.
the postcards, I guess, because this is where I spend my summers. But
Well, let me
yeah,
interject. I think it's great that you recognize that
oh
because
man.
so many people live and don't look around and
Yeah.
pay attention to the beauty that is
Yeah, we
around
are
us.
so fortunate that I mean that you can go any direction and just be in the beautiful mountains. And I never cease to be inspired and amazed. Even if I've been to a place numerous times, you still it's just that moment of look at this, this is amazing. So I'm
Yes.
very grateful for that. But yeah, so I started out teaching dance and physical education at Montana State University. That's where I started my career and performing dance. And
Well, to get to be a university professor, you've got to have some credentials, right?
well, yeah, I had a master's degree in physical education and health, and then started out just teaching some of the physical education classes, and then was hired as an instructor.
And you grew up in
Now,
Montana?
I grew up in Wyoming,
Okay.
and then I made an executive decision when I was graduated from high school. It's like, oh, they have great skiing in Montana, and I think they have a PE program. And so I literally showed up on their doorstep about 3 weeks before school started. And it's like, can I go here? It was a lot simpler back then.
It
And
was.
yeah,
It
it was.
seriously was.
And so I started at MSU and ended up being a great fit. But yes, I went to the school. I got a teaching assistant when I was getting my master's. And so that's how I started teaching with them. And then they hired me as soon as I had my master's. So that was a lot of fun. I taught dance, jazz, tap, ballet, modern, social dance, all that, and then performed and co-directed the dance company. And so that was a really fun period of my life.
So You Think You
And
Can
then I
Dance was one
decided,
of my favorite shows.
what's that? What was
So
it?
So You Think You Can
Oh
Dance?
yeah,
It's one of my
yeah.
favorite
Oh,
shows.
I know. I'm always amazed at that. Some of the things that people can do, and it's just cool.
I
Um,
usually cry at least once in the episode. My husband can't understand. I'm like, the music, the way they choreograph and they pair the music, and then how the dancers orchestrate it, it's like amazing. It's a very emotional, to me, very
yeah,
emotional thing when something taps into that. It's
yeah.
it's so great. I love that.
What I love so much about dance, I have a lot of friends who are runners and stuff, and I never could run because I'd just be thinking about all the stuff I should be doing. I couldn't seem to. But with dancing, you can't do anything but be in the moment because you have to be listening to the music, staying with the rhythm. You have to pay attention to the steps you're doing, make sure you're not running over someone else or whatever. And so you're completely immersed in it, which is such a lovely thing to just be
Ah,
completely immersed in something where you can't think about anything else but that.
that is so
Um,
true.
and then just to have the advantage of the music and the movement and the camaraderie and all that at the same time is lovely. So
It's so true
it's
about running too. That's like the zillion things in your to-do list go through your mind.
I can I did never could do that, and I never was a runner ever, and I admire people who can do it, but it was never been my thing. I'd rather be on horseback.
Yeah.
But
I did go through a period where I was running a lot and I could not run without music.
oh yeah,
So I had
hmm
to have the music because it kept me going and the
kept you
beat
in that
and I
kind of
guess in a
rhythm.
way that distracted me from all the things, but all the things still came up. So you
I think
rode
there's some.
horses as a kid, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, I grew up on horseback basically when I was probably I have a pictures of me when I was probably 4. I can remember my cousin and I used to I'd go stay with her a lot in the because they had a ranch and we'd be there and we'd sneak out first thing in the morning and wait till they had these big draft horses. We'd wait till they put their heads down to eat and then we'd jump on their necks like little monkeys and hang on until they lifted their heads and then we'd shimmy down to their backs and just sit up there, you know. And so I just grew up on horseback and just have a lifelong love affair with horses and very
Yeah,
grateful
I
that
can
I
agree
have
with
them.
that. I had a horse when I was growing up. So
Mm-hmm.
Billy Jack. Do you remember that movie?
Billy Jack. I
Yes.
do remember that movie.
She's
I
my age,
do.
so we same decades
Yeah,
that we
same
were in high school and
same time
yeah.
frame for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so I can relate to the love ever since I was a kid, just
yeah.
the horse movies, horse books just
Yeah.
fascinated me. But
Yeah.
I didn't keep that up as I aged and ended up going on my own, but that's beautiful. She said she had 6 horses.
I do. I say 5.5 because one of them is a pony for the kids, but they're actually only 3.5 are mine because the other two are my sons. And when we moved here to Townsend, their places are not set up for horses and ours is. So I've got there too. So I'm like, how did I end up taking care of everybody's horses, But it's okay.
That's what
They're all
moms
good.
do.
Yeah, that's what moms do.
It's a
But
little bit
I
more
have,
than like my husband, because he's my second husband. He doesn't understand kids' stuff that you keep after they've grown up and moved out. And so we have a couple of these tubs, one for one kid and one for and they have like stupid stuff like teen magazines and things they collected
yeah,
and projects in high school and actually elementary school. And he's like, when are you going to get rid of those buckets? And when are you going to give those back to the kids? Now they have kids of their own and it's not horses. I need to tell him, be
yeah.
glad
At
it's
least it's
not
not a horse.
horses.
At least you're not cleaning up manure every day.
That's right. That's a lot of work. I used to work at a barn and yeah, I
I know it's
mucked.
kind of
Yeah.
funny because for Christmas, I told my sons, well, what you're getting me for Christmas is one of these big manure carts that are super easy. They're like $400. So I was like, that's what you guys are buying me because I'm cleaning up the manure.
Yeah.
But
I
that
bet they
to
have a
me,
lot better technology now than when I was doing
oh
it.
man, yeah, yeah.
And
So
and
anyway,
I would take the urine soaked poop manure hay and I would put it in a wheelbarrow and I'd take it around behind the barn and the pile just kept growing.
oh, huge, yeah,
Like, what do
yeah.
you do with it
Well,
over
the good
time?
news is that eventually turns into really good fertile soil for gardens. But yeah, it's by the end of the year, you're like, wow, I've moved a lot of that. But anyway, it's
So, how
just
did you
part of
get
the
into
deal.
aging? Because you were young and now you're an expert at it. And what made you attracted to that as a topic?
That's an interesting question. For some reason, I think it's because I had a really close relationship with my grandparents. And my grandmother, especially, was so just, she was just always on the go. And she was a person who her house was always open to guests. And she was in her 80s, even as she was a widow and whatnot. And her house was just a revolving door of people always stopping by and having coffee. And she just was very engaged and active. And so I think that really sparked my love of that idea that why shouldn't you be completely engaged and active throughout your whole life. And so when I went to college, when I started my master's degree, I actually started with a project on older adult fitness. I was going to do a 10-week project and do the pre-test, the post-test, 10 weeks of exercise, blah, blah. And then about partway through the project, the dance instructor who I'd been teaching with as an assistant decided to take a year's leave of absence and ask if I would take her place. And so I said, sure. And so I took over that position. And then I switched my project to a dance related project. But I had this whole research project mapped out. Well, 10 years later, this gal came to me and she said, I hear you have a project on older adult fitness. I would like to do that for my thesis. And so I just handed it to her. I guess it was about 3 years later. Anyway, she created the Young at Heart program and started it and had it going for a while. And then 10 years later, I came back and took that program over. It was when I started to have kids. It was having late night rehearsals for dance company and all that became really hard. And so I took over the Young at Heart program.
I
And I
love the
started
name
looking
of that.
Yeah, it was a great program. And we had water aerobics and low impact aerobics and all kinds of things. And so I started looking for information. And there was no good information on exercise for older adults. There were some Jane Fonda videos that were, quite frankly, terrible. And that was about it. That's how I ended up writing the book in the field. And because I started researching and finding information and started experimenting. And so my first book was published. And that opened a lot of doors. And so then I started my consulting work. That was 25 years ago. I started full-time consulting on health aging. Mm. And when I first started out, I was really all about fitness. Like, oh, you got to stay fit and that's going to be it. And then I started realizing that you can be really fit, but be a mess in all these other areas. And so I looked at the 6 dimensions of wellness model. And that 6-dimensional wheel has been around a long time with various, some are 4 dimensions, some 6, some 8. But the idea that you have to have a full, complete life. And so I started looking into all that and doing all kinds of work on that in senior living, helping senior living companies build a concept of the 6 dimensions of wellness in their communities. And then,
so what do you do with the wheel? So
well,
when you sit down with somebody, you say there's these 6 dimensions. Do they evaluate with the wheel that I share with my students? I have them evaluate where they rank themselves in these areas on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
But over time, I realized that, and we beat ourselves up. First of all, we tend to grade ourselves lower than we're actually in truth. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, we berate ourselves for being low in something when it might not have high value to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, faith, if that's one, some people might, I don't go to church every Sunday. And so they rank themselves low. Well, what really is the definition of faith to you? Is it more spirituality? And,
right.
And even is that important to you? Because if it has low importance to you, then should you really be beating yourself up for not being really good at that? And so anyways, I'm curious what you do with the wheel, how you talk to people about it.
I think that the one thing that I really stress with the wheel is that the wellness wheel is not about perfection. It's about just awareness of having a full dimensions of life. And for example, the physical dimension, it doesn't mean physical perfection. It means physical competence in my mind, meaning that with whatever physical abilities you have, that you're making the very most of them. And I always use the example of this young man from Bozeman and Kevin Conley, and he was born with no legs. And yet he had climbed mountains. He traveled the world by himself up, and he uses a skateboard to get around. So you can imagine getting on a plane and all this stuff. And he went by himself on this kind of world tour. And he actually wrote a book called Double Take, which was pictures of people's first reaction to him when they'd see him going by on a skateboard in all these different countries. But anyway, you think about if you looked at his physical dimension, you couldn't say that it was, he had high, his physical dimension was perfect. But his physical competence is off the charts. What he could accomplish, he's climbed mountains, he's done amazing things. And so the concept that it's not about physical perfection, it's about physical competence. It's not about emotional dimensions, it's not about being happy all the time. It's about your ability to navigate the ups and downs, so emotional agility.
Yeah.
And the intellectual dimension is not about your level, your IQ. It's about, or your level of education is about an intellectual curiosity. You stay curious, you stay engaged in life, you keep learning, keep growing. And so that's the way that I use it. I do ask people on my website, there's a free downloadable thing called the Vitality Portfolio Starter Toolkit. It's a PDF. And in that, there is a place where you can draw your own wellness wheel. And it just kind of gives you a sense of how many deposits am I making in each one of these areas? And is your wheel really lopsided? Is it missing a whole spoke? And then it's like you said, looking at it and saying, if I'm not doing anything physically, but I really do value my physical well-being, I really do want to be able to continue doing everything I want to do physically, then that's a time to say, you know what, I need to make more deposits in that area. And
Or,
same
I
with
mean,
all.
I think of stuff where, I'm feeling lethargic and I'm just feeling like blah. And I
Yeah,
realize, oh, I'm spending more time on the couch or sitting
yeah,
than I
yeah,
am
right.
standing. So I got a
Yeah,
standing desk so I can
yeah,
stand more. So it's
right.
recognizing, tuning in, it sounds like, to that category, and like, how do I feel in this area? Right? Because if you
Oh,
feel
there you
like
are.
physically you have an ache somewhere, it's like an ongoing ache. Well, address the ache. What is it? Is it something that can
Right.
be fixed? Right?
And that is so critical right there. That really hits to the nail on the head. Hear so many people say, oh, well, my knee hurts now that I'm 40 or 50. And I say to them, well, did your knee hurt when you were 20 ever? Did it ever hurt? And what did you do when you were 20? Maybe you took some Advil, maybe iced it, maybe whatever. It's just that idea of not allowing age to determine the outcome, not allowing age to determine your reaction to that particular thing. And it's kind of like that whole senior moment thing. It's one of my pet peeves when people use that phrase, because it's telling your brain, you're reinforcing the idea that as you get old, you're going to be forgetful and stuff. And I always say to people, well, when my kids were in school, I'd remind them 3 times in 10 minutes to take their backpack, gym shoes, and homework to school. And half the time they forget at least one. So should I have had them evaluated for memory impairment? You're like, can you imagine that conversation? Doctor, they keep forgetting their gym shoes. So it's not preventing yourself from attaching meaning to that forgetfulness that is this focused on age, because there's a ton of research now on brain health and how the brain works when you get older compared to how it works when you're younger. And one of the things they found is there's a lot more connections between the right and the left brain. And so whereas as you're younger, there's a lot of separation, but as you get older, there's a lot more connections. So it's like your brain is processing back and forth a lot more. So yeah, you don't have the same speed of processing, but you have more efficient processing. And I think that's
Yeah.
why you talk about people who become wiser with age. So you can see a lot of gray areas instead of everything being black and white, because you've
Yeah.
had a lot of experience and you have a lot of things going on. And
Yeah. One
so,
thing too is people don't realize about the food you eat and how that affects your brain,
oh,
and how it's
absolutely.
like they say your stomach is your second brain. And
Mm,
I was really surprised to read that there's foods that cause inflammation in people. So everybody's unique, and certain foods, even if you don't even realize they're disagreeing with you, they could be causing inflammation. They might taste great and you have no side effects, but you might have some sort of stressor going on internally that you don't even realize about.
yeah,
It could be a little bit of bloating, or it could be a little
yeah.
burping or something like that. But what I learned is that when you're young and you're like in your 20s and 30s, that you can pretty much eat anything unless you have an allergy, and your metabolism is such that you're just like, it doesn't affect you. The older we get, the longer we've subjected our bodies to those items which are
Those
causing
stressors. Yeah.
inflammation. So the older we get, the more it's going to have side effects that are going to show up. And we never think of brain fog as a side effect of what we're
Mm-hmm.
eating.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
No,
it's
I,
not because, well, it might be because I'm older, but it's because I kept repeated over and over and eating these things that I should be eliminating.
yeah. I
And
think that's there again, that whole it encompasses everything. If your
yeah,
health encompasses everything, all the dimensions of well-being. And again, I think so much is your attitude towards things. In the wellness wheel, in the model that I call the vitality portfolio. So you have the wellness wheel, which is those 6 dimensions of wellness, and then the core assets, which are ageless thinking and resilience, because those are the things that people that live to be 100+ year olds and are very engaged in life and healthy, those are two aspects, two assets that they have in spades. They really have those. And then there's the functional assets, strength, mobility, and endurance. Now, whether you are a fitness person or not, I really encourage you to take functional ability, take the physical function out of the fitness category completely, put it in the survival category. Because your body is the way you interact with the world. So your ability to continue interacting with the world in the way that you want to really hinges on your strength, mobility, and endurance. And the good news, I mean, we used to believe that people just lost all the strength and did all that, as you age, you're just going to become frail. And that is very common and that is very predictable, but it's not normal. They have done so much research that showed that you can retain high levels of strength, mobility, and endurance well into your 90s and even hundreds. And they did a study with nursing home residents, age, I think it was 76 to 98. And they did a strength. These were people who had multiple chronic conditions, enough so that they were in a nursing home. And they did a strength training program with them for 10 weeks and doubled the average strength increases was that they doubled their strength in those 10 weeks. People who were walking with walkers were walking with canes. People who were in wheelchairs were able to walk with walkers. And so it just showed you, no matter how deconditioned you get, your body's there ready and willing and able to support you. So again, take it out of the fitness category. Stop thinking about it as fitness and think about it as survival and function and really being able to do the things you want to do your whole life.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
I think
longevity. You want to live
longevity,
longer?
think
Yeah.
about it, is
Yeah.
longevity and independence.
True.
Because
Yes. So
it's
true.
really about independence. The minute you start losing, I have this really interesting slide, and it's cross section of thigh muscles. And so you see the bone in the middle, and you see the muscle on the outside, and then you see the fat layer. And it shows I think it's a 50-year-old, no, it's a 30-year-old triathlete, and then it shows a 76-year-old sedentary man. And there you can see the big muscle mass and hardly any fat with the triathlete, the younger man, and then you can see the reduced muscle mass and a large amount of fat for the 76-year-old sedentary man. But then the last slide is the cross section of a 74-year-old triathlete. And he's got the same muscle mass as the 35-year-old triathlete. And the thing that I say, if you had believed that age equals functional decline, age equals loss of strength, those first two slides make sense. Yeah, well, he's old, so now he has no muscle mass. But then you look at that 74-year-old triathlete and go, wait a minute, he's got the same muscle mass. And the important message there is that the 35 and the 74-year-old triathlete maybe only needs to use about 30% of their muscle leg strength to get out of the chair. That 76-year-old sedentary man would have to use probably 90% of his leg strength and about 50% of his arm strength to get out of the chair because he's lost so much muscle mass and strength. Now, eventually, as he keeps losing that, even 100% of his leg strength and 100% of his arm strength is not getting him out of that chair. Now his life has permanently changed. So because he needs other people now to help him get up and down off the toilet, get up and down out of a chair, walk down. And so I think if you can make that flip switch in your brain, that it's not about fitness, it's about function and independence, then it makes it worthwhile to make those deposits.
Yes.
And
So
you don't have
true.
to be a triathlete. It just means you have to get out and walk. You have to get out, do some exercises with your leg, do some range of motion stuff. Just move so that your body knows that you need to move and you want to move.
Yes. I was thinking while you were talking that this is going to air on New Year's Day. And wouldn't it be a great episode to get someone to take action,
Mm-hmm.
setting New
I
Year's
hope so.
resolutions or setting goals for 2025
Yeah.
and improving the quality in some of these dimensions that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I think the hardest thing for people to do is to figure out where to start
Yeah.
because
No, I agree.
they're many in many cases. I think about my parents and their siblings. I've just had two aunts die. My mom died 6 months ago. My mom was bedridden for many years of her last life. So yeah, I totally lost her independence.
Yeah.
And my mom was depressed. And so she couldn't get herself out of that depression.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know that was a more severe form of that. But for people who just are like, I just can't get motivated, I can't get started, what would be something small that you would
Mhm.
suggest that
Yeah.
that could maybe set a little fire under them for the new year?
Right. Well, two things. Number one, I mean, I talk a lot about micro opportunities to micro deposits into your well-being. And little things like if you're talking on the phone, stand up and sit down 10 times or something like that, or just attach movement to things you do every single day. So if you're brushing your teeth, standing in front of the sink, brushing your teeth, stand on one foot and just kind of practice your balance. Just add a couple of little things in instead of, I think the mistake people make is like, okay, this year I'm going to get fit and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do it 5 days a week and I'm going to do it for an hour at a time. It's not realistic for most people to go from 0 to 100 just in 24 hours. It's just not going to happen. You have to start developing the habit. And
So
so,
I have to interject because the Atomic Habits book talks about that, and I love that. So that
yeah,
would be
I've
a
heard
good
about that
book
book.
for them to read to learn
Yeah,
about that. But
I think
attaching
so.
something, a new habit with an existing habit.
Exactly. Attaching so what something you do every single day without fail. Attach that habit, attach a new good habit to it, whether it's, let's say that you like to get up in the morning, you like to read, but maybe you're reading a novel. What if you attach before you start your novel, you do 10 minutes of positive reading, gratitude journal, positive mindset stuff, something that kind of gives you that uplift and gives you a boost of motivation, and then read your novel.
Yeah, it's
Just
like a
attaching,
reward. It's like
it's
a
a reward. And
reward.
for me, like for myself, I know that if I don't do my morning exercises before I do anything else, that I probably won't get it done. It's like I get sucked into the world, into the day. So I don't even make I'm a big tea drinker. I don't make my tea or do anything till I've done my dance warm up stretches, strength stuff. And then I go about my day. So it's just knowing yourself, knowing what are going to be those barriers. A lot of people, if they're still in a working life, if they don't put their gym shoes and their workout stuff in their car with them, they're never going to go back to the gym when they get home. I would never. Just, once you get home, you're like, I'm home. So kind of predict the things that trip you up. And then don't think that it has to be at the gym. It can be at home, but you just have to move. You have to do things. Well, the other thing I was going to say is that I encourage people to go to my website and download that free Vitality Portfolio PDF because it really does give you some of that basic guideline idea. You can go to my website, brilliantaging.com, and there's a bunch of little functional exercise videos that you can get to that are,
Oh, that's a
again, you can
great
just
idea.
website,
Yeah.
they're free, just, use those. And there's some functional exercise things that you can just download and use as well. And then I was been encouraged for a long time to create an online course for the Vitality Portfolio. So it's a 4-week course, but I haven't finished putting up the payment portal or anything yet. But if you're interested in that, you can just go to my website and there's a little link there that says notify me when the course is ready. I'd be happy to do that. But anyway, the point of that being is that making the plan, and that's the whole concept. The Vitality Portfolio is you have to make a plan, Vitality plan. Then you need to identify and balance the Vitality assets, and then you need to make deposits. So, that course just leads you through that. Here's make a plan. What do you want? What do you want to be able to do? And, when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, what do you want to be able to do? And then very carefully look at what are you doing to either support or detract from that potential outcome. Everything you do, most people are afraid of some big health crisis that's going to, damage their independence. when actually it's more likely that it's the habitual patterns repeated over and over and over again that are going to either take you down that health curve or up the health curve. The daily habits compounded over time have a tremendous impact. So just trying to think through, what am I doing right now that's actually taking me down the health curve? What am I doing that's taking me up? And because nobody stays the same, you're not staying the same. Life is not static, it's changing all the time. So if you're not going up, you're going down. And so really think about that and think about, okay, here's what I want to be able to do. And that's the whole part about making that vitality plan.
Yeah, and
And then,
I like what you said about what do you want? It
yeah, what
starts
do you
at what do
want?
you want? Because how can you create a new habit to go with your old habit if you don't know what you want?
What do you want?
What do you
Yeah,
want the outcome to be of adding that new little micro
right.
habit into your day?
Right. And I think that's what the important thing about when people try to start these new habits. What is the motivation? Because if you don't truly know the motivation of it, it's very difficult to keep at building that new habit. And one of a really more memorable experience I had, I was at an assisted living community. I was speaking about this concept of maintaining strength and mobility and all that. And afterwards, this woman came up and she was using a walker and she was crying. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah," she said, "but I thought last year was the last time I was going to get to see my grandkids for Christmas because I can't make it up their stairs anymore. Now I think maybe I can."
Oh,
So she had heard that message that she could regain her strength.
happy
And she did.
tears.
It was so amazing. And she started doing, they had great Keiser equipment in the community, this air resistance equipment. And she started lifting weights and doing it. And she was able to go because they have stairs. They had a
Mm.
number of stairs to get up to her, where her son lived. And so she was able to get, so she could do stairs again. And she surprised them by being able to come and stay with them
Yeah.
because she
So
could
she
manage.
every time she did that little new habit, she
Every
associated
time
with those
she,
grandkids and seeing her
right.
grandkids.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's critical. Figure out what
Yeah.
you want. What's your vision? What you want to be like when you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s. And what is it going to take to do that? It's like you have to think about, if you want to travel, for example, think about what it takes to travel. You need to be able to climb stairs into an airplane. You need to be able to put your luggage over your head. You need to be able to, if you want to go see Machu Picchu or something, you have to be able to climb all of those stairs. I mean, think about what it is you want to do and what are the assets that you need to do that. And
Yeah,
then
I
just
think
think about it as a
sometimes
project.
I'd love your take on this. I think sometimes people they add too much. They like instead of just one thing at a time and
Mm-hmm.
excelling at that or achieve. I think those micro habits and
Mm-hmm.
attaching them with existing habits before you even start to eliminate anything. Because we start off like, I'm going to change everything.
Yeah, I'm going to change everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And add all
Yeah.
this new stuff. But I think just adding something new that's little and then succeeding on that gives people a lot of confidence.
It does. It really does. And that's the whole point. If you have these huge, grandiose plans, and then you set yourself up for failure, and then you fail, and you go, yeah, well, I did it again. I failed. And I think that having those small incremental things that you keep getting better at, and if you haven't done any kind of physical activity for a long time, just start by walking and start by doing some wall push-ups or something, and just something very simple. But again, to me, the important thing is establishing that habit of making that deposit. And if you find that maybe spirituality is important to you, but you haven't spent much time in contemplation or whatever about whatever spirituality means to you, carve out that 5 minutes before you start reading your novel or whatever, and just give yourself 5 minutes to contemplate that and what it means to you. The emotional dimension, same thing. If you're not a particularly optimistic person, maybe you tend to be pulled over into more fatalistic thinking. There is a ton of really good books about how the positive mindset physically impacts your well-being. And there's one called, oh gosh, Timeless Healing. And it's an old book by Robert Benson, I think. But anyway, Timeless Healing. And what it is a collection of, he's like a Harvard trained physician. And he started realizing how important people's mindsets were for recovery from any kind of injury or just their health in general. So it's all this research on how the mind's perception of your health and well-being physically impacts your body. And they even did studies on, like, they were giving people, they'd give two different groups. One group they gave them both a stimulant, but they told one group that it was a depressant rather than a stimulant. And even though it was a stimulant, there was like 60% of them who their vitals were depressed instead of stimulated. And that was all the mind
Yeah.
believing that it was a stimulant. And so if something like that your mind can override an actual physical something introduced into your body, it just goes to show you how critical that positive mindset is. More recently, they did a study, Becca Levy out of Yale University did a study that showed that people who had a positive mindset about recovering from a severe injury were 44% more likely to recover fully than those who had a negative idea of it. So that's
Yes.
huge. Yeah. 40%, yeah. 44% more likely to recover fully from a severe injury or disability. That's remarkable.
It's like visualizing, if you think about an athlete, visualizing the winning point. It's visualizing the perfect surgery.
Yeah, visualizing the perfect surgery, visualizing the perfect recovery, visualizing how you want to be after that. There's a couple of things that I know that really seem to resonate with people when I'm speaking at conferences and whatnot. One of them is that concept of, if you look at young people who are born with disabilities, now that things have changed so much. Years ago, it was terrible, and now there's all this. They're given resources, tools, and encouragement to overcome the disability and live fully in spite of it. But if you look at what happens when an older adult has some sort of an injury or disability, they're oftentimes only given resources and tools to cope with that, as opposed to overcoming.
Yes. So
Think
true.
about how dramatically different that mindset is between just coping versus overcoming. And that has a profound difference in the outcomes. And so young people with no legs are climbing mountains. And then one older person that can't use their legs anymore or has problems with it, suddenly they're, here's your walker, good luck with that. Or here's your wheelchair, good luck with that.
Yeah.
So I think it's so critically important. That piece of it is so critical that you really do train your mind to believe in the most positive outcome, and that you think about using adaptive strategies to overcome versus cope with challenges. We're all going to face challenges. It's going to happen. But what are you doing when you face that challenge?
Yeah, I had my college roommate. She had an experience with cancer. She had breast cancer, and this is several years ago now. So when chemo wasn't as sophisticated as is now, now I hear like your hair doesn't fall out as much. I mean, I think it all depends on the concoction, but this was a time when you would get really sick from chemo. And I actually had her on the podcast, and it was a great interview because I wanted her to share her story because we lost touch for a bit of time. And so when she shared with me, when we reconnected about what she went through and how, first of all, it was crazy how she found out about it because she was avoiding going in for mammograms. And one day her friend was like, let's go on a walk. And she she never walked with a woman, and she would normally say no, and she said okay, and then they start talking about mammograms, and she said and she had breast cancer. So she read a book on the power of positive thinking, and the author happened to live in Florida. She lived in the Orlando area.
Yeah.
So she was able to actually see him, and so she had a couple appointments with him, and she went through her chemo treatments, never had any side effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's to this day fine.
It is remarkable. And I really do encourage you, now that I've thought about it more, that Timeless Healing book, his name is Dr. Herbert Benson.
Benson. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll link in the show notes to that.
Yeah. I'll make sure I get you the exact stuff with it.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure, because what it does is, I think, a lot of people poo-poo the concept of positive attitude is going to impact your health. but there is actual scientific evidence that it does. And so in my mind, it's like, why wouldn't I use everything I could
Yes.
to recover as fully as possible, whatever comes along, and to overcome whatever comes along? And the other thing I really encourage people to think about is that a lot of times what happens is you're going along, really, everything's going good. And then all of a sudden there's a health crisis, and all of a sudden, bam, down you go. And then a lot of people only do just enough physical therapy they don't even really get back to their full potential. And then they go along at a lower level of ability for a while, and then they have another crisis. And so it's just sort of this stair step down into dependence and frailty. And so the concept of don't let a health setback become your new health set point. Think about overcoming it and getting healthier and stronger and better than you were before you had the health crisis. So if there's nothing else people take from this, I hope they take that concept that don't let a health setback become a new health set point.
Yeah, that happens a lot with sicknesses.
Oh, yeah.
I remember last June I got so sick, and then my mom died, and I think part of it was exasperated from my stress of going through
Sure,
that,
sure.
and I could not get better, and it took a lot out of me,
Yeah,
and I think sometimes it's hard to get back into the
it
groove
is.
when that
It is.
happens. So, and there's a lot of illness this time of year, so keep
Yeah.
that in mind. I also was thinking about I should share this because last year I was having stomach issues, and I was doing some research, and I learned about a mini trampoline and how the
Oh,
mini
yeah.
trampoline
Mm-hmm.
is a low impact thing, and it helps with your lymphatic system. It
Yeah.
drains your lymphatic system. And I was like, well, that looks like a healthy thing, and I can
Yeah.
just jump while I'm
Yeah.
watching TV.
Yeah.
So that's what I got for Christmas.
Uh-huh.
And I started, and I remember it was like forever to just do it for 2 minutes at first. I was like, I
Yeah.
am feeling out of shape. And it doesn't really take that. You don't sweat like you do in a cardio. It's just,
No,
you're just
no.
bouncing up
Mm-mm.
and down, but it's just my body wasn't used to that. So
Yeah.
I just decided I'm going to add a minute every week. And just that's all. I'm just going to do the micro
Yeah.
habit.
Right.
I'm putting
Right.
it in front of the TV. So it's like in my way to watch TV. So
Right.
I've
Yeah.
got to be on it
Yeah.
it's there. I can't avoid it. And so I found myself adding more minutes than I had planned, which was really exciting. And I got
Yeah.
up to 30 minutes. And I tell you, every single day, I think on Christmas Day, did I do it on Christmas Day? One of the days last week I missed, but pretty much
Every
consistently
day.
7 days a
Yeah.
week I'm on that thing. It's now
That's
moved into
awesome.
my basement, but I have this new habit of going down there and turning on a show while I'm
Yeah.
doing it. And
Yeah.
it is a habit I started a year ago,
Yeah. Good
and
for you. Yeah.
it's 365 days later. It's consistent. It's kind of built to my routine. So if
Yeah.
I can do it, I know somebody who's listening can do it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people love to stream movies and stuff, especially in the winter, like around in Montana, Wyoming, those areas. It's just long winters and it's cold outside. So you start streaming shows and whatnot. So what I'll do is I'll get involved in a show, but I won't allow myself to watch it unless I'm on the elliptical.
Oh, that's
Even if
good.
I'll say I'm just going to do 10 minutes on the elliptical, and then I can watch the show for the half hour or whatever. But most of the time you end up just staying with it because you get involved in the show and you keep going. So what you're doing is exactly the kinds of behavior change things that the experts suggest is start little. Don't try to do 30 minutes at once. Start with a minute, then add another minute or another 30 seconds or whatever. Just keep adding until you're at that comfort zone where you can keep doing it. And so I
Yeah.
think
And
that's
some
the
days,
key.
if I feel like, oh, I can't get a whole 30 minutes in, I'll be like, okay, I'll do 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll try to squeeze in another 10 or 15 later. So
That's the whole
you can
message.
adjust. Yeah.
Yeah, because all of the research says, oh, if you do 30 minutes of physical activity a day, like 30 minutes of walking or whatever, that has tremendous health advantages. But that doesn't mean you have to do all 30 minutes at once. Maybe you do 10 minutes in the morning, and then you do 10 minutes at midday, and you do 10 minutes at night. And like you say, attach it to something, attach it to a show you want to watch, attach it to you want to go. Having a friend to walk with is always awesome because it just
Mm.
gives you that, oh, I've got to be there at this time and walk with them or whatever. Or maybe you just want to talk on the phone while you're walking. We've got the cell phones. You maybe just talk and chat and walk or whatever, but attach it to something that you already do because that's going to help you more than anything get a habit built.
Yeah.
I created this whole series of exercises when I was working with a community one time called our seesaw exercises, which was an acronym for seniors exercising effectively while sitting around waiting. And so, just for fun. But if you're sitting there, just flex your ankles and point your toes and circle your ankles. You would be surprised if you're just sitting there like a desk or a chair or whatever. If you just flex your ankles up off the floor and just keep doing that, you'll get to about 10 times. And man, you feel the fronts of those legs really starting to work. It's such a small thing, but
Yeah.
really critical to keep
Beautiful.
those really strong. So just little things like that, working with the hands because your hands can get really stiff.
Yes.
Just the little things, just adding those in to your
Thank
life.
you
And
so much for being
yeah,
here and spending some
oh,
time
you're
with
welcome.
us. And we can kick people off in 2025 with some great ideas. What are you
Yeah,
looking forward to doing in 2025? Do you have any big goals or
yeah, actually,
trips or
it's so
anything?
yeah, well, it's interesting because, like I said, we just moved 6 months ago, I think in July. We made a huge move after 42 years being in the same place. And I really underestimated how much it would take me down in terms of physically, emotionally. I mean, it was a huge thing. And moving out somewhere I've been for a very long time to here, all good stuff, but it was exhausting. And I fell off of my exercise routine. I fell off of my positive affirmation reading. All the things that were keeping me healthy just kind of fell to the wayside because I was so overwhelmed with this move. So, long story short, what I'm going to do is I'm taking what I'm calling my golden gap year. and and basically for me it means I'm going to devote myself to just getting as healthy as possible again and using my vitality portfolio concept the way I know it can be used and do some travel. I really want to go to Africa and ride horses in Africa. I think
Fun.
I want to do that for years, so I'm going to do that. But otherwise, it's like committing to and investing in my well-being. So I really come back to being as healthy as possible and shaking off all that stress and just rebooting for the next 3 decades or so.
Walk the talk. And I love the Golden Gap. That I haven't heard that. I'm gonna,
Well, I started thinking about this golden gap year and thinking, well, why should high school seniors have all the fun? I'm not sure whether I want to retire or what I want to do, but let's just take some time here and just say, I'm
gap
just
year
going
to
to
figure it out. That's so
immerse
true.
myself in life. And I started taking guitar lessons with my youngest grandson or my oldest grandson, who's 7. And I just bought an old carousel horse that I'm going to, it's a wooden one that I'm going to refinish and repaint and just do some stuff and just have fun and decide what's next after that. So,
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks so much.
all right. Thank you all and happy new year to everyone.